There is a moment inside every studio, usually in a conference room nobody outside the industry ever sees, called the green light. A group of executives sit around a table and approve spending $2, $3, sometimes $400 million on something that does not exist yet. No factory, no inventory, no guaranteed customer, just a script, a cast list, and a bet that millions of strangers will want to watch it in a specific 90-day window that keeps shrinking every year. Get that bet right and you can print money for a decade. Get it wrong and you can lose more in one weekend than most companies make in 10 years. In 2025 alone, Disney's live-action Snow White cost somewhere around $250 million to make, grossed only about $205 million worldwide, and is estimated to have lost the studio somewhere north of $200 million once marketing is counted. That is not a rounding error. That is a mid-sized company's entire annual revenue gone because of one green light. Stick around, because by the end of this, you will understand why owning a movie studio might be the single riskiest way to get into the entertainment business, and why the smartest players in Hollywood right now aren't betting on movies at all. They're betting on owning the whole casino. Subscribe before we go further, because this gets stranger. Here's the first thing that trips people up. The number you hear reported as a movie's budget is never the real cost. That figure is only the production budget, what it took to actually shoot the thing. It does not include what the industry calls P&A, prints and advertising, the marketing spend needed to get anyone to show up on opening weekend. For big franchise films, that marketing line can run as high as the production budget itself, sometimes more. So when you hear a film cost $150 million, the real all-in cost, once marketing, overhead, financing interest, and talent participation deals are added, can easily push past $300 million. And theaters do not hand studios the full ticket price either. Exhibitors typically keep somewhere close to half of domestic box office revenue, with the split shifting further in the theater's favor the longer a film stays on screens. Internationally, it gets worse. Studios usually collect only around 40% of box office abroad, and in China, historically one of the biggest markets in the world, that share drops to roughly 25%. This is why the industry rule of thumb has settled around a film needing to gross 2.5 times its production budget just to break even, and that rule assumes marketing costs stay reasonable, which increasingly they don't. Which brings us back to Snow White, because it's a textbook case of every one of those numbers working against a studio at once. $250 million production budget, tens of millions more in marketing on top of that, a lukewarm $205 million worldwide gross that had to be split roughly in half with theaters before Disney saw a cent, and international box office that historically returns less per ticket than domestic. Run that math in a film needing to clear somewhere around $500 million globally to break even, instead limped in at less than half that number. The film got made, got released, played in theaters. The bet simply didn't pay off. And there is no insurance policy in this industry that covers a movie nobody wanted to see. If you want to see the full spreadsheet on how a $200 million flop actually loses money line by line, drop a comment, and I'll build that breakdown next. Now step back from any single film and look at how distribution itself actually works, because this is the layer most people skip entirely. A studio rarely just releases a movie. It signs a distribution deal, and the terms of that deal decide who actually gets paid first. In the traditional studio model, the distributor, often the studio itself, takes what's called rentals off the top of box office revenue, roughly half of the gross, before a single dollar flows toward recouping the production budget. Independent films work differently. A producer without in-house distribution has to shop the finished film to a distributor, sometimes offering a minimum guarantee, a fixed upfront payment the distributor pays regardless of how the film performs, in exchange for handling theatrical release, marketing, and collections. Get a strong minimum guarantee, and you're protected even if the film underperforms. Get a weak one, or worse, Self-distribute without the marketing muscle of a major studio, and you're fighting for screens against films with $100 million ad budgets while yours has none. This is the quiet reason so many genuinely good films never find an audience. Distribution, not quality, decided whether anyone ever heard the movie existed. Because here's where it gets more interesting than just one bad release. This has always been a boom or bust business, but the ground underneath it has genuinely shifted in the streaming era, and the numbers prove it. The North American box office in 2025 sat around $8.6 billion. In 2019, the last full year before the pandemic, it was closer to $11.4 billion. That's not a temporary dip. It's a permanent floor, roughly 20% lower than it used to be, and ticket sales, the actual number of people walking into a theater, are down closer to 37% from 2019 once you strip out rising ticket prices. Meanwhile, the theatrical window, the exclusive stretch of time a movie plays only in cinemas before it's available anywhere else, used to run around 90 days as standard. Today, it commonly runs somewhere between 17 and 45 days depending on the studio, with some releases barely lasting a month before showing up on a streaming service the studio also happens to own. Every day shaved off that window is a day of exclusive ticket revenue traded for the hope that people subscribe instead of buy a ticket, and that trade does not always pay for itself. Mid-budget films, the $70 to $100 million dramas and thrillers that used to be Hollywood's reliable middle class, have been hit hardest by this shift, since they rarely have the built-in franchise pull to justify a big theatrical push, and streaming has quietly become their real destination from day one. So if the theatrical model is structurally smaller than it used to be, and a single movie can torch $200 million in one weekend, how does anyone justify owning a studio at all in 2026? The answer, increasingly, is that nobody wants to own just a studio anymore. They want to own the library, the streaming pipes, and the distribution muscle all bolted together, because scale is the only thing that survives a bad quarter of movies. Watch what just happened with Warner Bros. Discovery. Through late 2025 and into 2026, Paramount, Skydance, and Netflix ran a genuine bidding war for the company, with Netflix at one point offering roughly $82 billion, including debt for Warner's studio and streaming operations alone. Paramount came back with an all-cash offer of $31 a share for the entire company, valuing the deal north of $110 billion, and by mid-2026, that deal had cleared Justice Department review and was heading toward closing. That is not one studio buying another studio's back catalog. That is a company deciding the only defensible position left in this industry is controlling HBO Max, Paramount Plus, a century of film libraries, and every future theatrical release all under one roof, so no single flop, no matter how expensive, can sink the whole operation. Want to know what actually changes for you as a viewer once mergers like that close? Comment which streaming service you'd want to see survive, and I'll cover that in a follow-up. And notice what almost every major studio has quietly done in response to all of this. They've stopped betting on new ideas nearly as often as they used to. Sequels, remakes, and franchise entries built on characters audiences already love carry dramatically less risk than an original story, because the marketing has effectively already been done by the last movie or the last three. That's not creative laziness, even though it often gets criticized that way. It's a direct, rational response to a business where a single original flop can cost more than a studio's entire quarterly profit, while a mediocre franchise sequel with built-in recognition rarely bombs quite as catastrophically. The safest asset in this entire industry is not a great new script. It's a character or a universe you already own the rights to, that you can keep releasing for decades without ever having to convince anyone from scratch that it's worth their time. Because here's the closing truth about this business. Owning a movie studio was never really about loving movies, and it's even less about that now. It is a capital-intensive, unpredictable, contract-heavy operation where a single green light can lose more money than most businesses will ever see, where the theatrical window that used to protect your revenue keeps shrinking by design, And where the only real hedge against any of that isn't a better script, it's owning enough of the pipeline, the library, and the platform that one bad Snow White can't take the whole studio down with it. The movie is never really the business. The library, the platform, and the merger that lets you survive the next flop are. If this changed how you look at Hollywood's balance sheets, hit subscribe, because next time we're pulling apart another glamorous-looking business that's actually a high-stakes numbers game underneath.